Right now, billions of people around the world are watching the biggest sporting event in human history. And it's happening across 3 countries at the same time, for the very first time ever. The FIFA World Cup 2026. USA, Canada, Mexico. But here's what most people watching the games don't know. The stories behind these 3 nations are absolutely mind-blowing. We're talking ancient civilizations that vanished, borders that were literally stolen, a country that once had no trees, and a city that is sinking at the rate of half a foot per year. I went deep on all 3 countries to find the craziest, most jaw-dropping facts you've never heard, and I packed them all into this one video. So whether you're watching the World Cup right now or just curious about the world, buckle up. This is going to be wild. Before we dive into each country, let's talk about this tournament itself, because the numbers are absolutely insane. For the first time in World Cup history, 3 countries are co-hosting the event. And this isn't just a symbolic thing. The games are being played across 16 different cities, spanning over 4,400 kilometers from the northernmost stadium in Vancouver, Canada, all the way down to the Estadio Azteca in Mexico City. To put that in perspective, that distance is roughly the same as flying from New York to Iceland. And the players and fans are expected to travel those distances between games. Now, the tournament has 48 teams, which is 16 more than any previous World Cup. That means 104 total matches. To watch every single game live, without sleeping, you'd need to be awake for over 150 hours straight. And the money? FIFA is expecting about $3.9 billion in broadcast rights alone. That's more than the GDP of some entire countries. Here's one more stat that blew my mind. The combined population of the 3 host countries is over 500 million people. That's almost twice the entire population of South America. Now let's get into the countries themselves, starting with the one that's kicking things off. Mexico. Mexico, the country that opened the 2026 World Cup on June 11th at the most iconic football stadium on earth, the Estadio Azteca. But here's something wild. This is actually the 3rd time Mexico has hosted the World Cup. 1970, 1986, and now 2026. No other country in history has hosted it 3 times. But the craziest thing about Mexico isn't football. It's the country itself. Let's talk about Mexico City, one of the World Cup venues and one of the most fascinating cities on the planet. Mexico City was built on top of a lake. No, seriously. The Aztec civilization called the Mexica built their capital, Tenochtitlan, on an island in the middle of Lake Texcoco in 1325 AD. When Spanish conquistadors arrived and conquered the city in 1521, they drained the lake and built Mexico City on top of the soft, waterlogged lake bed. And here's where it gets insane. Because the city was built on this soft sediment, it is literally sinking. Mexico City is subsiding at a rate of about 50 centimeters, almost 20 inches, every single year in some areas. Since the Spanish colonial era, parts of the city have sunk by more than 10 meters. That's a 3-story building underground. You can actually see this in the city. Historic colonial buildings are visibly tilted. The Metropolitan Cathedral, built in the 1500s, leans noticeably to one side. Engineers have had to install counterweights and drainage systems just to keep it from collapsing. And yet, 22 million people still live there, making it one of the largest metropolitan areas on Earth. Here's a fact that shocks most people. Mexico doesn't actually have an official national language. Spanish is the dominant language, sure. But legally, Mexico has 68 recognized national languages. 68. The government officially recognizes indigenous languages like Nahuatl, Yucatec Maya, Mixtec, Zapotec, and over 360 dialects of those languages. And here's the thing. Many words you use in English every day actually come from Nahuatl. the language of the Aztecs, chocolate, tomato, avocado, chili, coyote. Even the word Mexico itself comes from Nahuatl. So the next time you eat guacamole while watching the World Cup, you're technically honoring an ancient Mexican civilization. You're welcome. Every year, something completely surreal happens in the mountains of central Mexico. Around 4 billion monarch butterflies, yes, billion with a B, migrate from Canada and the United States down to a small forest region in the state of Michoacan, Mexico. They travel up to 4,500 kilometers. They navigate using the position of the sun and the Earth's magnetic field, a biological GPS system we still don't fully understand. When they arrive, the trees literally turn orange. The weight of the butterflies bends the branches. The sound of their wings is described by locals as a soft, constant rain. The indigenous Purapeca people believed these butterflies were the souls of their ancestors returning home. Scientists are still unsure exactly how monarch butterflies, which only live for about 8 months, managed to find the exact same trees that their great-grandparents visited. They've never been there before, and yet they find it every single year. In most of the world, death is a subject people avoid. In Mexico, they throw a party. Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, is a multi-day celebration where families build elaborate altars called ofrendas, decorated with marigold flowers, photos, food, and possessions of people who have passed away. It's believed that on these days, the dead can cross back into the world of the living. And this isn't a sad event. It's festive, colorful, joyful. Families picnic in cemeteries, sing songs, and eat the favorite foods of the deceased. UNESCO listed it as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity. And this tradition dates back over 3,000 years, long before the Spanish arrived. Mexico City has more food options per square kilometer than almost any city on Earth. It is one of only a handful of cities where you can eat authentic food from every region of a country in a single afternoon. Mexican cuisine was one of the first in the world to be declared an intangible cultural heritage by UNESCO in 2010. There are over 59 distinct regional cuisines within Mexico. The food in the Yucatan has almost nothing in common with the food in Oaxaca, which has almost nothing in common with the food in Baja California. So if someone tells you Mexican food is just tacos and guacamole, now you know better. Canada, the second host country of the 2026 World Cup, and the one that surprises people the most. Because when most people think about Canada, they think hockey, maple syrup, polite people, and a lot of snow. And yes, all of that is true. But there's so much more to this country than its reputation. Canada is hosting the World Cup for the very first time. And it's only the third time the Canadian national team has ever even qualified for the tournament. But let's zoom out and talk about the country itself, because it is genuinely one of the most extraordinary places on the planet. Canada is the second largest country in the world by total area. It covers nearly 10 million square kilometers, more than the entire continent of Europe. It has the longest coastline of any nation on Earth, over 200,000 kilometers. If you try to walk it at a pace of 30 kilometers a day, it would take you nearly 19 years. And yet, only about 38 million people live there. For comparison, the state of California alone has about 40 million residents. This means Canada has one of the lowest population densities of any country in the world. More than 80% of Canadians live within 150 kilometers of the U.S. border. The vast majority of Canada's landmass, the north, the tundra, the boreal forest, is essentially empty. In fact, Canada has more lakes than the rest of the world combined. There are over 2 million lakes in Canada. 2 million. The stereotype that Canadians are extremely polite is, according to actual research, largely true. And there's a fascinating cultural and historical reason for it. Canadian culture places an extraordinarily high value on social harmony and collective well-being. The word sorry in Canada is used so frequently that in 2009, the Ontario legislature actually passed what became known informally as the Apology Act, which clarified that saying sorry in civil cases doesn't automatically constitute an admission of legal guilt. They literally had to pass a law because people were apologizing too much. But here's the deeper truth. Canadian culture was shaped by the idea that you don't impose yourself on others. The country was built on coexistence between French and English speakers, between European settlers and indigenous nations, between dozens of waves of immigration. The politeness isn't performative. It's structural. Toronto, one of the 2 World Cup host cities in Canada, is frequently cited as the most ethnically diverse city on Earth. Over 200 languages are spoken in Toronto. More than half of Toronto's population was born in another country. And this isn't an anomaly, it's Canadian policy. Canada has one of the most open immigration systems in the world and was one of the first countries to adopt official multiculturalism as a national policy in 1971. Every year, Canada accepts hundreds of thousands of new permanent residents. And critically, the Canadian model of multiculturalism doesn't ask immigrants to abandon their cultures. It asks them to add to Canada's culture. The result is a country where you can walk from a Jamaican restaurant to a Portuguese bakery to a Vietnamese noodle shop to a Sikh temple, all within a few city blocks. Quick round. Things Canadians invented. Basketball. Alexander Graham Bell, who lived in Canada, invented the telephone. Insulin, the life-saving drug used by over 500 million diabetics worldwide, was discovered at the University of Toronto in 1921. The electric light bulb was developed by a Canadian inventor before Edison, though Edison got the patent. The snowmobile, the BlackBerry phone, standard time zones. Yes, the entire global system of time zones was proposed by a Canadian engineer named Sanford Fleming. And fun fact, the garbage bag was invented in Canada in 1950 by Harry Wazelik. So next time you take out the trash, you're participating in a proud Canadian tradition. One of the most magical things Canada offers is access to the Aurora Borealis, the Northern Lights. And Canada's Yukon Territory is considered one of the best places on Earth to see them. The lights are caused by charged particles from the sun colliding with gases in Earth's atmosphere. They appear in colors of green, purple, red, and blue, and they dance. They genuinely move across the sky like curtains in the wind. Indigenous peoples across Canada have mythologized the Northern Lights for thousands of years. The Cree believed the lights were the spirits of the deceased dancing in the afterlife. The Inuit in some regions believed they were spirits playing football with a walrus skull. Football. Even the ancient spirits were playing football. Feels appropriate for a World Cup year. Canada is a prosperous, peaceful nation, but it has a shadow side that Canadians themselves are grappling with. For decades, Indigenous women in Canada have gone missing and been murdered at rates far higher than any other demographic in the country. A national inquiry in 2019 concluded that this constituted a form of genocide. The inquiry found systemic racism within law enforcement, healthcare, and child welfare institutions. This is a country that is genuinely trying to reckon with its history. Imperfectly, slowly, but trying. The World Cup coming to Canadian soil has also prompted renewed conversations about Indigenous land rights and recognition. I mention this not to be heavy, but because understanding a country means understanding all of it, not just the lakes and the maple syrup. And now, the main stage, the country hosting the most World Cup games, the country where the final will be played, a country that is, without question, one of the most fascinating, contradictory, and misunderstood nations in human history, the United States of America. Look, everyone has an opinion about America, but most people, including many Americans, don't know the truly strange, mind-blowing, and genuinely weird facts about this country. So let's go. The continental United States alone spans from tropical forests in Florida to frozen tundra in Minnesota. It contains active volcanoes, tropical rainforests, desert landscapes that get less rain than the Sahara, and mountain ranges that rival the Alps. Death Valley in California holds the record for the highest reliably recorded temperature on Earth, 56.7 degrees Celsius. That's 134 Fahrenheit, recorded in 1913. Alaska, also a U.S. state, experiences temperatures of minus 62 degrees Celsius in its interior. The same country, the same flag, a temperature range of nearly 120 degrees Celsius from one part to another. The United States has the world's largest network of highways and roads, over 4 million miles of paved roads. If you laid them all end to end, you could circle the Earth 160 times. The U.S. has more than 13,000 airports, more than any other country on Earth, and more than the next several countries combined. China, for comparison, has around 500. And here's one that's hard to visualize. The U.S. economy is so large that if you took just the state of California and made it its own country, it would be the 5th largest economy in the world, ahead of the UK, India, and France. Texas alone, as a country, would rank in the top 10. America has a complicated relationship with food. It's home to some of the world's most celebrated chefs and finest restaurants. New York City has more Michelin stars than almost any city on Earth. At the same time, the United States has one of the highest rates of food insecurity and obesity in the developed world. About 34 million Americans, roughly 10% of the population, live in food insecure households, meaning they don't always know where their next meal is coming from. And this is in the country that produces more food than it could ever eat. The U.S. exports massive quantities of food every year. This is one of the defining American paradoxes. Enormous abundance and enormous suffering, often in the same zip code. Here's something that surprises people. The United States is by far the most religious, wealthy nation in the world. Among developed nations with high GDPs, Germany, France, Japan, Australia, the UK, religious practice has declined dramatically over the last 50 years. In the U.S., the decline has happened too, but far more slowly. A significant percentage of Americans still attend religious services regularly, believe in miracles, and say religion is very important in their lives. The reason is debated by sociologists, but one theory is this. In countries with strong social safety nets, religion fills a smaller role in people's lives. In the U.S., where healthcare, retirement, and social services are more fragile and individualistic, religious communities often provide the support system that the government does not. The U.S. has no official language at the federal level. English is the de facto language, but the country is home to speakers of over 350 languages. About 41 million Americans speak Spanish as their first language, making the U.S. the second largest Spanish-speaking nation on Earth, after Mexico. So the two countries kicking off the 2026 World Cup, Mexico and South Africa, Mexico opens the tournament, and the U.S. will cheer in Mexican Spanish from stadiums in Miami and Los Angeles. The U.S. also has a fascinatingly diverse history of regional dialects and accents. The accent of someone from Alabama is almost unintelligible to someone from Boston, who sounds completely different from someone from Minnesota, who sounds nothing like someone from New Orleans. These aren't just accents. They're living traces of where the settlers in each region came from. Scotland, West Africa, Germany, France, indigenous nations. The United States is a country in a constant, very public argument with itself about its own history. It was founded on ideals of freedom and equality. It also practiced chattel slavery for nearly 250 years, longer than it has existed as a free country. The legacy of that history in economic inequality, housing, education, and healthcare is measurable and ongoing. What's unique about America compared to many other countries is how loudly this argument happens. In many nations, historical crimes are buried or minimized. In the U.S., they're debated on television, in schools and elections, in sports stadiums. Whether this is a sign of health or dysfunction, or both, is something Americans themselves fiercely disagree about. And honestly, that disagreement itself tells you a lot about the country. Let's end the U.S. section on a fun note. The U.S. state of Alaska is simultaneously the westernmost and easternmost state in the country. Because the Aleutian Islands cross the 180th meridian into the Eastern Hemisphere. More than 40 U.S. presidents have been of Irish descent. If you're Irish, statistically, you've basically already been president. Montana has 3 times more cows than people. Wyoming has even fewer people, with a population of under 600,000. It's the least populated state and would qualify as a small city in most countries. The U.S. has a town called Nothing in Arizona, though it's now abandoned, a town called Boring in Oregon, which is twinned with Dull in Scotland, and a town called Intercourse in Pennsylvania. America, baby, the clash of 3 worlds. So what happens when you put these 3 countries together on the same stage? You get something that's never happened before in sports history. A World Cup that crosses 3 time zones, 3 cultures, 3 histories, and about a dozen climates. Think about this contrast. A player could win a group stage game in Vancouver, Canada, a city surrounded by mountains and fjords, where half the population speaks a language other than English, and then travel to a knockout match in Mexico City, a megacity built on top of a sunken lake, an altitude of 2,240 meters above sea level, where the thin air makes it physically harder to run 90 minutes. And then the final? In New York/New Jersey, the most globally recognizable city on Earth, in a country of 330 million people who are still figuring out whether they love football or not. Here's my take. The reason FIFA chose these 3 countries isn't just about stadiums and TV deals. It's because they represent something genuinely important. Mexico is a country with one of the richest, oldest, most continuous cultural traditions in human history. Still alive, still vibrant, still fighting to be recognized. Canada is an experiment in whether radically different people from every corner of the world can actually build something together. A country that's still being written. And the United States is the loudest, most contradictory, most influential country of the last 100 years. A country that simultaneously inspires and infuriates the world, often at the same time. Football, the world's game, being played across all 3 of them at the same time, that's not just a tournament. That's a mirror held up to humanity. So there you have it. 3 host countries, 3 extraordinary stories. A city sinking into a lake, a nation with 2 million lakes and barely anyone to swim in them, and a country so large it argues with itself in 350 different languages. The 2026 World Cup isn't just the biggest sporting event of the year. It might be the most geographically and culturally complex event in the history of the tournament. Which country's fact surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely read them all. If you want to keep going deeper on country curiosities, I've got videos on the weirdest borders in the world, the countries that almost don't exist, and the ancient civilizations that vanished without explanation. All linked right here. Hit subscribe if you want more of this, and I'll see you in the next one.